Hello, my name is Will Esterling, and I'm the music director at Your Cosmic Symphony, where we bring live music to your community performed by your community. I'm very welcomed to be joined here by David Cook, who we're going to be featuring in our concert this coming May, entitled Love and Loss. David, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you so much, Will.
Specifically today, we're here at the Anne-Marie Sculpture Gardens in Southern Maryland, specifically inside their arts building, and surrounded by art in this community, something that is familiar to any Southern Marylander. And with this being said, let's just jump right into things. So when we go see music concerts, and David and I were talking about this before we got together, the purpose of this, for lack of a better word, this is an interview. And the question is, like, why are we going to do an interview when we have this audience that's going to come?
Yeah.
And I mentioned it's very unique what we do at Cosmic because we're performing what we call, for lack of a better word, classical music. And the irony about performing classical music to this audience is when we think of classical music, we think of oftentimes old music, European tradition, dead composers. And that's true, that we're performing the music by Bizet, even some American composers, Leonard Bernstein. However, our audience, most of them are not familiar with this. We have very young kids who come all the way to the senior members of our community. So I think that giving them an opportunity to meet you is going to add a lot of value to their concert coming experience. Because I mentioned before this interview started, that someone like Taylor Swift, you go see her concert, the Swifties, they know every word. If you are going to see a Taylor Swift concert,
you know what you're going to get.
You know exactly what you're going to go to get. And that's true also in the classical world a little bit as well. We use marketing that's like, we're going to go see Beethoven, and a lot of people know who Beethoven is. So this is really my long-winded way of saying, let's get to know David Cook a little bit. So David, really open-ended first question, which is, how would you, how do you like to identify yourself, whether that's as an artist, as a human? How would you like our audience to get to know you?
Sure. A majority of my accolades and my performances has all been based in opera and classical repertoire, and doing the major works and doing opera roles and all these types of things. And my awards have been all from singing competitions in classical music and all those types of things. But through and through, I am a singer. I am a tenor, and I share my gifts with those things that make me feel inspired, with organizations like yours that are inspiring and that are doing fantastic work. And in particular, so I'm also, aside from my singing work, I'm also now finding a new avenue of teaching and directing. I'm the director at Esperanza Middle School, the theater program there. My wife and I were running it, but she's no longer there. So I'm there now at the helm, and that has brought me a lot of joy. But I don't like to pigeonhole myself or just do any one thing. But more so, I am invested to be involved with organizations and things that go about, that promote good, that promote community outreach, and that make me feel inspired and happy to do work that is bringing goodness to those around me.
So one of the projects, you identified yourself as tenor. For our audience members that aren't familiar with that word, what does that mean in the world of singing?
Sure. So a tenor is just the Fach, F-A-C-H, of the voice. So I started out as a baritone, which is a lower type of singer. So normally you have soprano, tenor, alto, or mezzo-soprano, and then you have a baritone. And it's just the difference of where the voice is most comfortable. I started out as a baritone, and some of you may have seen me recently. I was in Newtown Players' Sound of Music, and I sang Captain Von Trapp. And Captain Von Trapp was a very low role for me. It was like a baritone bass, very, very low, but I could fake it, and it was great. But I'm most comfortable singing in the tenor Fach, and it's just higher, right underneath the soprano, not as high as the soprano, but it's a higher tenor voice. Not as high as a countertenor either,
Sure.
but it's a higher voice part. Yeah.
And with that, voice parts in the world of opera,
Yeah.
they've developed what we could say tropes,
Sure.
or the stereotypes that go with that.
Yes.
What are some of the stereotypes
Yes.
of tenor roles
Yeah.
and that you're going to be singing in our upcoming
Yeah.
concert?
So the tenor roles in opera are always the romantics, and the baritones or the bassos are always the villains, right? And you have the heroines, which are the sopranos, and the mezzos are always kind of. It's difficult to place the mezzos. They're a lot of times singing pants roles, or they'll do other Handel type of Baroque type of operas. But yes, the tenor is primarily the lover and the romantic, and it is very fitting that it is the tenor that is the romantic, because the repertoire that we're singing for this concert that will be in May, in particular, from Nessun Dorma, from Turandot, singing Nessun Dorma. I'll be singing the very famous aria that Calaf sings about Turandot, and then I'll be singing, of course, Tony in West Side Story, and singing Tony's very famous aria Maria after he has his first encounter and falls deeply in love with Maria from West Side Story.
Great. So, our theme being love and loss.
Yeah.
Well, let's backtrack one
Yeah.
more step before
Yeah.
we get into specifically our May program.
Yeah.
I joined Cosmic this past September of 2022,
Yeah.
and I'm very fortunate to have been so gratefully welcomed by Cosmic and also the greater community
Yeah.
of Southern Maryland.
Yeah.
But this collaboration of you with Cosmic was, if I remember correctly, you reaching out to us.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you first hear about Cosmic?
Yeah.
What got you excited to collaborate with us? Because also, this season was our first, back in October of 2022, was our first concert in 2 years.
Yeah, from COVID.
So we were not doing anything.
Yeah.
I come in, brand new music director. So what was your motivation, and
Sure.
maybe even a little bit, what were you doing during that time of COVID?
Yeah. So my motivation, interestingly enough, so my wife and I moved here. Petli Banjorni, my wife, she's the director over at Chapticon for their choral department. We moved here, and I really wasn't doing a lot of work here. I was primarily doing a lot of operas, and I had some concerts going on with some other organizations outside of town. But after I came back from a recent opera that I did in Baraboo, Wisconsin, I was inspired. We can use the word inspired. I was inspired to rethink some decisions or some things that I was doing with my life, and I wanted to kind of regroup and kind of have a different focus for the work that I was doing, or the work that I feel that I'm charged to do as an artist. And so I started to look into avenues of possible collaborations right here in my community. Rather than going to New York or out of the country or whatever, I thought, well, why don't I look and see? And through that, it has been such a warm welcome to me. I got involved with the Arts Council here Wednesday, and Nell Elder when Nell was there, and I got a big grant from them to do a concert here, and that was very well received by the community, and it was a huge turnout. But of course, I also heard about Cosmic Symphony. And so, I thought, wow, we have a symphony here, and full orchestra here, and wow, what a great opportunity it would be to work with a fantastic symphony. And so, I reached out to Karen. I think COVID was still kind of around. It was probably on its way out, but it was still here. And Karen told me that they were still in fluctuation after COVID and still kind of working things out. But it was a possibility. Maybe we'll get back in touch at a later time. And she contacted me when they brought you on as the conductor. And she said, why don't we do a concert? I said, absolutely, let's do it. So, I went to Cosmic's concert a couple of weeks ago with the young artist, the pianist that won. And oh my God, I was blown away by Cosmic Symphony's sound under the direction of Will. Oh my God, amazing, the sound that came out of this orchestra. And of course, we were at the Dodge Performing Hall at St. Mary's University, and the sound was just amazing. So, long story short, I am very excited for this partnership with Will and working with Cosmic Symphony. I'm very excited.
Thanks for your high praise,
Absolutely.
David. We'll have to do our best to live up to that, and I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
Something that I relate to you really much as to, we're relatively early in our careers in music, and I appreciate the fact that you decided to look inward into your community where you found yourself. In the world of music, in the world of classical music also, we have these great centers, which are almost temples to the arts in what we do. The Met in New York. I find it interesting you mentioned New York. You're going to find some of the best opera in the world. However, as Cosmic being a community orchestra, and I always say this, live music in your community by your community. And that's, I think, a really beautiful thing that you, in fact, are a resident here. And I'm so happy that you made it out to our previous concert featuring Jane, who is a young soloist, lives here. She's actually in the orchestra full time.
Yeah, it's a violinist, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Very multi-talented.
Yeah.
And even members of the board, members of our board at Cosmic, and you mentioned Karen Roberts, who is our principal oboist and our president. So it's really, in many ways, a mom and pop organization. But people like yourself and Jane, that we take it to the next level, and I'm very fortunate for that. And you mentioned this new Performing Arts Center at St. Mary's.
Yes.
We did our first concert there this past March. Wonderful facility. I think it serves the orchestra really well. And
it does.
We weren't going to, originally, your concert wasn't going to be there because just how the calendar lined up. And the folks at St. Mary's offered us a deal we couldn't refuse, and to feature you in that space is going to serve the music really well.
Yeah. It is an honor. I don't mean to cut you off. It is an honor to be in that space. I'm sure many of you have visited, or if you haven't visited, hopefully you'll come and experience this space. Boy, top notch, right? You think about Strathmore and you think about, all these other great performing halls. Well, look, we don't got to go up to Virginia or up to DC because we've got our own right here in our own backyard, okay? So come on out. It's fantastic.
Brand spanking new. And I hope I'm hoping that it will bring people from outside the community, but also just a space for members of the community. That's going to be great.
That's right.
So we've talked about how we ended up here today, you reaching out to the orchestra, and where we're going to be next month in May. So my next question is, let's dive into this rep a little bit.
Sure.
At the end of the day, one of the responsibilities as the music director is programming concerts. And it's always been really important for me that concerts are accessible to those who don't typically see orchestras. And I mentioned earlier, we have, oh my gosh, I mean, I've seen infants at our concerts, and that's a beautiful thing. Very young people who are getting exposed to music for the first time. People who, they're bringing their kids there, or they just want a different artistic experience, and they're coming. And then our senior members of the community who are usually the ones that are more familiar with what we're doing. Right. So I picked Love and Loss as the theme because of your background as mostly an opera, your experience with operatic singing. Sure. Because love stories in the world of opera go back to the very, they really go back. So let's dive into your rep first. You mentioned Nessun Dorma. If I remember correctly, that's actually not going to open the concert. That's going to be after we play the Bizet. But that comes from the opera Turandot. Puccini, Italian composer.
Yeah.
In many ways, his most famous opera is La Bohème, which is a love story as well.
Yeah.
But can you explain?
A tragedy. A tragedy.
Very much
Turandot is not
so.
as much of a tragedy,
No,
but a big
no.
tragedy. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you relate to the music that you sing?
Sure. And so let me explain. When I say a tragedy, it ends, Puccini's Bohème ends in a tragedy. Mimi from Bohème dies at the end of it, and Rodolfo has this big high note, Mimi! You know, he has this big thing, and she dies. So Puccini is a very famous composer for writing very big, lush, beautiful lines for the orchestra and for the singers, but he often writes very sad tragedies at the end. So back to what we're saying.
Let me interrupt you real quick just to say, and I encourage everyone, if you're not familiar with Puccini's music, please check out La Bohème, check out Turandot.
Yes.
One of the inside jokes we always have as musicians is in La Bohème, Mimi is sick.
Yes.
And she's singing her. And in the world of opera, we never want to sacrifice a beautiful voice.
Unless you're Maria Callas. If you're Maria Callas was the queen. She was the best. Anyway, yes.
But Maria's character, and if you know the movie Moonstruck, starring Cher and Nick Cage, a very young Nick Cage.
Yeah.
I watched this
love
recently.
Cher.
It features La Bohème and Puccini's music. Check out this movie, very interesting. But again, one of the jokes, an inside joke as a musician is knowing Mimi is sick, but she's singing some of the most beautiful and quite difficult music in the world.
Yes, yeah.
Let's turn back now to Turandot and Nessun Dorma, the music that our audience will hear next month.
And so, you know, on theme with love and loss, you know, Puccini is you know, a very wise choice to look at this type of a theme because of the beauty that he writes, both for the orchestral accompaniment, but also for the voices. Now, Turandot in particular, we have some loss, more so in a sub-character in Liu, who is Turandot's father's follower. It gets very convoluted, all the different characters and how it all works, but really the big sacrifice that happens is that Liu ends up killing herself to protect the identity of Calaf, because Turandot, it's her duty to find out what his name is so that she won't have to marry Calaf at the end. But, you know, Liu kills herself at the end and she sacrifices, she gives the ultimate sacrifice to protect Calaf, and in the end he ends up with Turandot, and it's a happy story for them, but kind of sad for everyone else that is involved with the story. But Puccini, in general, he's such a master in what he writes, just the line that he writes for the voice, in how it pairs with the orchestra. Now, you know, Turandot, and in particular Nessun Dorma, was made famous by the great Luciano Pavarotti, and all the famous singers of the past have sang it. But I am equally, I'm very much honored to be able to sing Nessun Dorma. This will probably be my first, my first appearance where I will sing this aria publicly. I have sung it for other private things, but this would be my first public event where I'm singing it for an audience like this. So, you know, growing up listening to Pavarotti, you know, the great romantic himself, singing Turandot and singing Nessun Dorma and have that being a staple piece for him, it's an honor for me to come listening from that and growing up and listening to Pavarotti to be able to sing Turandot and Nessun Dorma for this audience. So this is it's a great choice, on par, on theme with loss and love, or love and loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one of those tunes where I bet a lot of our audience is going to know it, but they're not going to. You're not going to know you know it.
Yeah, that's right.
In the world, again, before this interview, we were talking about our musical pasts, and I come from primarily as an orchestral player, but also a lot of wind band stuff, and so many bands and orchestras they'll play this piece without a singer just because the melody is so recognizable.
Yeah.
Now we're weaving you through the concert. You're not just going to have this block of time, and that's a really unique thing. A lot of times when we bring a soloist into a concert, typical orchestra concert, overture,
that's right,
soloist, concerto, intermission with a symphony.
And finish it out. Yeah.
Very atypical. not undone, but
Sure.
but I think it's going to add some flavor
absolutely.
and help keep the audience
Absolutely,
engaged and
absolutely.
you engaged as well.
Yeah.
So the song or the aria that you're going to begin with,
Yeah.
O Solo Mio,
Yeah.
I didn't know this,
Yeah.
but that's not from. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not from an opera.
Nope. It's just.
What's the history of this?
It's
tune?
just a Neapolitan Italian song that this composer, this Italian composer, Di Capua, I think is his name. I don't remember. Edit this part out. I don't remember what his name is. Anyway, so this Italian composer that he wrote O Sole Mio, My Sunshine, and it is. I don't know if it's because it's very Italianate sounding or it's very, the line for the voice is very beautiful. And so, Luciano, again, made this song very popular because he's from Italy and he brought a lot of that with him when he came. All over the world, he performed the song all over the world. And the three tenors performed it together, Domingo, Pavarotti, and Carreras. They all sang it together as part of the three tenors. And so, in particular, the three tenors in that concert that they did, they sung a majority of this music that from the generation from the past has kind of bled over from that generation to this generation, which means that it's very popular because people it's like in the back of your mind because of, a majority of these singers are still alive. Pavarotti passed away in 2007, but Domingo is still alive and doing well, and Carreras is still alive, and then he's singing as well. But, O Sole Mio, popular song, famous song, but it's just a simple Italian love song. Not an opera, not an art song, nothing special. It's just simple lyrics with a very simple accompaniment line, but it's as famous as can be.
Yeah.
Just a simple Italian love song. That's all it is. Yeah, but it's influenced though because these great singers made it so famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the culture and it's in their blood.
Yeah.
I was saying earlier that I was really fortunate during my studies as a conductor to have a teacher who was Italian born and raised.
Yeah.
And one of those stories that he would tell me is his grandparents. And he describes himself coming from a relatively poor family.
Yeah.
His grandparents could not read or write. The only thing that they knew how to do was to sign their name for legal documents. But songs like O Solo Mio and the staples of the Italian opera, which are adjacent to that, they knew every word to these because it was part of their blood.
Yeah.
And that's what I find, that's one thing I love about being in the world of what we call classical music with orchestras and operas, is when there are these connections between what we call like everyday life, people who maybe aren't concert goers, and then hearing music in the concert hall that maybe you hear outside.
Absolutely.
And the way that we're pairing that for, we're in the States, and our great tradition is usually identified as that of the musical theater, the musical. And for me, as a conductor specifically, one of the greats is Leonard Bernstein, American born and raised. And I've watched a lot of interviews with Bernstein, and it's weird because he wanted so hard to be a really serious composer. He wrote 3 symphonies. They don't really get played that much. His Mass is very popular, which opened up, just up the road, the Kennedy Center. It was the premier performance. But the work that even people who aren't interested in this music, they know him for is West Side Story.
West Side Story.
Pairing this theme of love and loss, and then musical opera adjacent traditions. Performing Maria was, I think, a no-brainer for us. And this is a tune that our audiences, I think, everyone in the States knows. So set the stage for us. What in the musical? Where does Maria take place, and what are some musical features that they should maybe listen for that kind of ties into the story that's going on there?
And so, Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story is such an immense masterpiece and deeply influenced by the very famous story of Romeo and Juliet, except at the end, Romeo dies and Juliet survives. So Tony dies and Maria survives. But very much on par with so when we say love and loss, on the surface, love and loss, right? But that's not really what we're talking about, right? It's the nuance of the emotions that come when you pair love and loss, because the two are married to each other. You cannot have love without loss, and vice versa. You cannot have loss without having love. And so Maria is sung fairly early on in the musical. They set the scene, you kind of feel a lot of, this tension of what's going on between the Jets and the Sharks. And, you have a lot of tension between the leaders. And then you kind of have Tony, who was a former Jet, but is best friends with the leader of the Sharks. And, he's kind of on his own island, kind of in foots in both camps kind of thing. And it ends up that they want to set up this brawl, and they're going to set up this brawl at this party that they go to, right? And this is the first time that Tony meets Maria, and they kind of, have their little tension thing, and Tony and Maria have their meeting, and they dance, and they're together, and, Tony falls deeply in love, as the romantic that the tenor is always. He falls in love with Maria, and he, the leader of the Sharks, which happens to be Maria's brother, separates them, and Tony finds out where Maria lives, her building, and he goes and sings this serenade underneath her windowsill, Maria. It's really interesting, though, the great master that Bernstein was, and he was the first composer that did this, using these tritones that he uses all throughout the opera, but in particular in the famous Maria. Da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. It's like he passes by the tritone like everything is fine, and so he sings it over and over, Maria, 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 and even that, right? The play on the word Maria, right? I think that must be one of the only songs or arias where the heroiness or the female's name is repeated so many times in the song, right? It's the main focus of the song is Maria, right? But it's filled with these tritones that suggest that even though he is in love, something is amiss, right? He's in love and he's full of hope and happiness and joy, but something is amiss. Something is not quite right. And so the famous thing with Maria is the way that it ends, is where he ends it on this tritone, Maria, right? He ends it on this beautiful high note, and then he resolves it to this tritone, right? Suggesting that death is coming, suggesting that pain is coming, suggesting that even amongst all of this love, loss is coming right around the corner. And so, great song, Maria, by the famous composer Bernstein. West Side Story was a no-brainer to pair for this concert. So it's amazing piece of music.
I appreciate so much the detail that you add into that, because Leonard Bernstein was like a nerd, a musical nerd. And for those who went to music school or know his music really well, like understanding these musical features really adds a lot of value to the music. And I'd like to elaborate just a little bit more on what you're saying. Again, this interval that we call the tritone.
The devil's tone.
It's the devil's tone. That was its nickname back in the day because it was considered so dissonant. It's like, what goes here? Another famous place that Bernstein uses this is in his Mass, which again opened up the Kennedy Center, and in the opening song entitled "A Simple Song," which is sung by a priest, that interval is used to symbolize doubt with regards to faith. And there's something about Maria, the obsessiveness that he's repeating the word over and over. It is so symbolic of like the obsessive nature of love, and how sometimes love, it gets also labeled as being people who feel like they're tortured by their love. And that, and I mean, it ends in this story with death.
It does.
And that's a crazy thing.
And it's so interesting, when you read about the story, if you've seen the musical, so it's nuanced as Romeo and Juliet, but it's not Romeo and Juliet because they don't both die, right? Only one of them dies. And it's heartbreaking because one of the members of one of the other gangs convinces Tony that Maria has been killed, and he ends up killing himself right as he sees Maria walks in. I mean, how devastating is that, right? So you think she's dead, and right as you end it, she's there, right? What a tragedy. You know, I mean, there is no greater tragedy than that. You know, and there is no greater, nuance of this love and loss as you know, you think that the person is there, but no, they're right there, and you're the one that ends up dying. And, you know, Maria, obviously, she can't do the deed. She can't do it, and so she, you know, will live with that for the rest of her character life, whatever. But it's just such a masterpiece.
And these are emotions that all humans feel.
That's right.
And that's what makes it so relatable.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite recording or performance of West Side Story, or maybe this song?
Because I'm an opera guy.
Yeah. No, I'm curious.
Because I'm an opera guy, so it was not performed. It was a concert recording of Kiri Tekanawa, and Jose Carreras singing Tony, and Kiri singing Maria, and amazing recording with Bernstein at the helm of the orchestra. Amazing recording.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that's my favorite recording too. There's a really good documentary that people should check out.
Yes, it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free. It's on YouTube.
I think it's called The Making of West Side Story.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And for me as a young conductor, this was awesome because you got at least 2 hours of Leonard Bernstein conducting.
Yeah, and see the process, the whole process. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Great recording.
A lot of people who come, again, you have a more operatic background.
Yeah.
A lot of people who come from a stronger or more musical theater-based background, my friends, they criticize me for liking this recording because they're just like, it's a musical. Why are they using opera singers? But I think it adds a...
I do too.
It adds a lot.
Too. Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
David, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
I'd like to wrap up with, for me, again, it's what I like to have audiences, how I like to bring them into our world is to use themes and narratives that are relatable to them. And again, I don't think you can get more relatable than love and loss.
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate how you said the surface level, it seems like a really simple theme, but there's so much nuance in the music.
There's so much more to that,
This will be my last question for you, which is, what do you hope the audience will take away from this performance in May? Very open-ended, I know, maybe unfair.
Well, I will say this. It is my job, as I think that it is the job of any musician or artist that is invested in doing the work that needs to be done. It is my job to be as honest, as clear, and with as much intent as I can possibly be to tell these stories, right? And so, this, as in any other role or any other engagement that I have done, I will prepare and I will try to tell these stories as best that I can do. And so my hope is that, one, I am able to successfully deliver what I hope I can deliver. But two, that, you know, this nuance of this love and loss, as Will said, is everyday life, right? It's everyday emotions. It's everyday the human experience, right? Because you cannot have one without the other. And so my hope is that when you come to this concert, of course, you know, it won't always be about the loss. You know, of course, we'll sing O Sole Mio and other things that will be just about the love and, you know, the wonderfulness of what that is, but also exploring this other nuanced section of this concert. So my hope is that the audience will leave having felt inspired, having felt moved by the music that we're doing. And of course, you know, I'm not the only one on the concert. Of course, you know, Will has done a beautiful job of the other orchestral things that they're doing by themselves. You know, you'll also hear things from Carmen. Oh boy, Bizet's Carmen is, you know, You want to talk about nuance between love and loss? Oh my God, amazing, right? With the gypsy,
Yeah, we didn't even get into that.
With the gypsy and Don Jose, right? And the anger and the passion that Don Jose has, and ends up, he ends up dead at the end, and Carmen, the manipulator, and all of this stuff.
What's with all this death around
I know.
love? It's
But you cannot have one without the other. So this concert is going to be a fantastic exploration of these very strong and intense human emotions. And as it is my job, and I'm sure Will feels the same, it is our job to be as honest at telling these stories as we possibly can. So come on out in May and experience this fantastic concert. It's going to be one not to miss.
David, thank you so much for sharing your time.
Will.
Looking
Thank
forward
you
to
so
working
much.
together.
Thank you so much. Come on out.